So, as you know, today we'll be discussing the 5 conditions or 5 states of the mind. I'll just share an image for what we have done previously. So here in this image which I am sharing now, you can see what we have already discussed. We have had 4 discussions on this subject. Today is the final one. So first we discussed some basic concepts regarding the human mind. Then we discussed its 4 functions: Manas, Buddhi, Chitta and Ahankar. Then we discussed the conscious, subconscious and superconscious, that is the 3 levels of the mind. And in the last discussion we had discussed the 3 constituents of the mind. So we have discussed 4 functions, 3 levels and 3 constituents. Today we will discuss the 5 states. 5 states of the mind. As usual, this is very important because not for any theoretical gain, but to understand what our state is, what is the state in which we are now. Because generally we judge ourselves by our own standards, that is the thing. So only these saints and sages tell us that there much lies beyond, much needs to be done to improve the condition of our mind. What we are experiencing is not everything. So these references are very necessary so that at least we are aware that there are higher states of the mind in which we are now. And maybe we can also realize that our condition is not a very happy one, unfortunately. So those who are familiar a little with the Patanjali Yoga Sutras will know that the very first sutra or the very first aphorism says Atha Yoga Anushasanam. Now yoga is being explained. That is how we start. In our philosophy, it is so systematic that first they tell us what they are going to discuss, what they are going to explain. Then they start the discussion. There is no ambiguity about the subject. So very first sutra is, now yoga is being explained, what yoga is. So the word yoga in our philosophical literature has generally 2 different meanings. First is union between the individual soul and the supreme soul. But we have to remember that in the yoga philosophy, the meaning is different. What is the meaning? That also has been described. It says yoga samadhi. What is yoga? Yoga is samadhi. Samadhi here means concentration, minding. Concentration. So that is what the term yoga means in this yoga philosophy. There are 2 roots from which this word is derived, as we have discussed, that in Sanskrit all the words are derived from roots. So samadhi is also derived from a root like yoga. So there is a root called yuj. Yuj means samadhi. So when yoga word is derived from the root yuj, it means samadhi or concentration. So this we should always remember, because the term yoga will of course again occur again and again. So yoga in yoga philosophy means samadhi or concentration. Now it is interesting to note that the ability to concentrate is somewhat inherent in our mind. Concentration is a feature of the mind in all its habitual states. All the 5 states we are going to discuss now, concentration can be achieved. Concentration is possible in whatever state the mind is. But the thing is, concentration attained in all these states is not yogic concentration or samadhi. This we should remember. Just concentrating the mind does not mean anything. Mind can be concentrated on so many things, on the world, on worldly pleasures, on our undesirable emotions, but that will not help us to gain samadhi. So that we will discuss the 5 states of the mind. These 5 states means these are called chitta bhumi. The 5 states of the chitta. Only the concentration attained in the last 2 states is yogic concentration. But the concentration attained in the first 3 states is absolutely useless for spiritual progress. This we should remember. So, what are these 5 states? Now we will take them up one by one. We will go slowly, so we need not be worried because of the Sanskrit terms. So these 5 states in Sanskrit are Kshipta, Mooda, Vikshipta, Ekagra and Niruddha. Kshipta, Mooda, Vikshipta, Ekagra and Niruddha. I will again, as usual, I will share the image so that it becomes clear. Here you can see, for those who are here, so Kshipta, Mooda, Vikshipta, Ekagra, Niruddha you can see. So the mind or chitta manifests itself in these 5 different forms. So these are called 5 states of the mind. First is the scattered state, which is the Kshipta state. Second is the darkened state, which is the Mooda state. Third is when the mind tries to concentrate itself. That attempt when it goes on, that is called Vikshipta or gathering. Means the mind tries to gather itself. The fourth is when it has already attained concentration, when it has already gathered itself. That is called the Ekagra state. And the 5th state is the final one, when all the vrittis, all the thought waves of the mind have stopped and we have attained the final state of yoga. That is the 5th state. So we should remember here that concentration can be achieved in all these 5 states, but the concentration achieved in the first 3 states, they are absolutely useless for spiritual progress. So we will discuss how these, it's a very extremely interesting study. Without the help of rishis, these saints and sages, we would not even know that these are the states possible in the mind. So we will discuss in brief the nature of these states, that is first. Then we will discuss what is yogic concentration, the definition of yogic concentration. Then we will see why the concentration attained in the first three states is not yogic concentration. So we know where we stand. So first let us come to the Kshipta or scattered state. The mind is completely scattered. Just like Swami Brahmananda has said that mustard seeds. Mustard seeds, when they fall on the ground, they completely go in all directions. Any small thing, it is completely scattered. So you have to make a lot of effort if you want to gather them again. So what is Kshipta as defined in yogic scriptures? I will just, for those who are interested, I will quote the Sanskrit, then the translation. So just I'll stop sharing this one second. So what is Kshipta? Tatra Kshiptam Rajasa Udrekad Asthiram. Udrekad means great preponderance of what? Of Rajas. Rajas is activity. And because of the great preponderance of Rajas, what happens? Asthiram. It is never still. It is always wandering from here to there. So what happens as a result? Bahirmukhataya sukha dukkhadi vishayeshu vikalpiteshu vyavahiteshu sannihiteshu. It is always scattered, it is always going out. Why? Because sukha dukkha vishayeshu. It thinks that sukh or dukh, happiness or misery, is in the vishaya, means in what is outside. That is why our mind goes outside, no? Our mind goes to Pizza Hut. Why? We think the pizza there contains a lot of happiness. Our minds go to an ice cream parlor. Why? Because we think that a lot of happiness is there. And our mind is turned away from some things because we think that it is unhappiness is present there. Because of this false conception, we don't know that happiness and unhappiness is all here inside. Because of this false conception that happiness and unhappiness are outside in the objects, the mind is always going outside. Because either it wants to take something or it wants to avoid something. And this happens because Rajas is predominant in the mind. And this type of state exists in whom? Unfortunately, it exists in Daitya and Danavas. So, it will exist in how to translate Daitya, demons. So, this kind of state exists in demons. Human beings are not supposed to have this state, mind you. This is the Kshipta state, when the mind is naturally restless. It does not have the patience or intelligence necessary for contemplation of any spiritual thing. It cannot comprehend any subtle principle. But here also concentration is possible. How? Because even these type of people have bad tendencies like envy, malice, hatred. So these type of people also, whose minds are never concentrated, when they have these feelings like hatred towards somebody, their mind becomes concentrated. But this concentration is not yoga. So generally this mind is totally restless, jumping from one thought to another, from one emotion to the next, from one object to the next. One oscillates between love and hate and likes and dislike, just like a leaf. There is a strong wind, a leaf is there, it has no weight of its own. It goes wherever the wind takes it. So even the need to control the mind is not felt. One is totally led by one's past karmas like an animal. So one who has this kind of mind never likes to think of God or anything, but feels happiness in only enjoying the objects of the senses. This is the first one. That is Kshipta. The second one, the Muda, is even worse. This Kshipta has a preponderance of Rajas. You can see here. But the second one is even more worse. What? Because it says Mudam Tamasa Udrekat Kritya Akritya Vibhagam Antarena Krodadibhi Viruddha Krityeshu Eva Niyamitam. So what is the feature of this kind of mind, the Muda mind? Tamasa Udrekat, it has a preponderance of tamas, darkness. As a result, what happens? Kritya Akritya Vibhagam, this difference between Kritya means what should be done and Akritya means what should not be done. That difference itself it does not know. Good and evil are the same for him. Absolutely no sense of discrimination. Go and harm others, go and bomb others, go and make the life hell of people in other countries or other states, or just for one selfish motives or ego, like we are seeing now. So these kinds of people never bother to think about right and wrong. They just do whatever it pleases them. They are completely covered with darkness. So who has this kind of mind? Again the same thing, Rakshasa and Pishacha. Human beings are not supposed to be like that. Those who are veritable, practically they are animals. These only, they have this kind of Muda mind because they lack discrimination, and that is why those who possess such minds indulge in vicious acts which brings suffering to others. So first type of mind, at least, is better than this one because it goes after pleasure, that is true, but it does not harm anyone. But this is the worst kind. So the mind, through obsession or infatuation, here also in a matter connected with the senses, it is unfit to think of any subtle principle. Like in the life of Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna also we see that many people used to come to him. Suppose two friends came. So one was very inclined to spiritual topics. It is there, it is mentioned. But the other friend, after some minutes, he is nudging his friend. Oh, why are you sitting here? Let's go. What is here? So these kinds of people, they will feel suffocation if any spiritual talk is going on or they are asked to think of God. But here also concentration is possible. Why? Because attraction to worldly things like family, wealth or their own selfish motive. So even a Muda mind can be concentrated. But this also is not yogic concentration for obvious reasons. Because that concentration is directed towards things of the world or one's own selfishness. So now we come to the third state, which is better than this one. We will again discuss the points for these three states, so you will have an idea again. So now we come to the third state. What is the third state? We can see here, Vikshipta. Vikshipta means gathering. Now what happens at that state of evolution, the human being realizes that no, this will not do. Some kind of discrimination has awakened. He has climbed a little higher. So, leaving Rajas and Tamas, now he is approaching Sattva, Sattva Guna. So, what is the description of Vikshipta mind? Because the Sattva is increasing, it realizes where true happiness lies. It knows that true happiness is not outside. It is inside, and for that he has to control his mind. So now he starts giving up all those tendencies and tries to concentrate his mind on higher things. That is why it is said that this type of states is existing in Tatcha Sadaiva Devanam. Deva. Deva does not mean God here. Deva means a highly evolved human being who is kind, generous, charitable, wants the good of others, these types of human beings. So, the first is where Rajas is prevalent. Rajasa Pravritti Rupam. Pravritti means activity. Rajas is always going outside. The second is Tamasa. Tamasa means Para Apakara Niyatam. See, Upakara and Apakara, there are two opposites. Upakara means doing good. Apakara means doing harm. So, when the mind is filled with tamas in the Muda state, they do para apakara, not upakara. They harm others. But here, Sattvena Sukhamayam Chittam Bhavati. Because of Sattva Guna, the mind is full of happiness. It does not go outside in search of pleasure for worldly things, nor is it interested in harming anybody. So automatically the happiness which is inside us, it springs forth in these people. They are always, if you go near them, you will feel peace. You will happy. But if you go somewhere whose Rajas is very happy, Rajas is very predominant, he is always restless. So if you go to him, you will also feel restless in 5 minutes. It happens, we know. But these people who are trying to concentrate their minds, slowly, since happiness is inside each one of us, so when they try to gather their minds by sadhana, that happiness slowly manifests itself. But this is also not final. This is not also yogic concentration. Because in this stage, the mind is sometimes concentrated, but it again becomes distracted. Like when we sit for meditation, what happens? Few minutes, okay, thoughts of God are coming. Again, what to eat next, what to cook next, how much I need money to earn tomorrow, what job to do tomorrow, these come. Again, when we again try to concentrate, again this happens. So it's a good state compared to the other two, but this is not yogic concentration. Most of the spiritual devotees have this type of mind. A mind which can be calm sometimes but disturbed at other times. When temporarily calm, a distracted mind can understand spiritual things. But when it becomes distracted, it again loses its understanding. Again and again we find that happening. So this is also not the final stage. We have to advance still further. And here also concentration is possible. But this concentration, although it is good, it does not last long. That is the problem. The concentration attained in the Kshipta and Muda state, that is not at all good. Because the first is for worldly objects, the second is for harming others. Those are two given up. Here the concentration is good because we are concentrating on spiritual things in the vikshipta state. But problem is it does not last long. So it is also not yogic concentration. Now we come to the fourth state. This is a very high state. This is called ekagra. Ekagra, all those who are familiar with Indian languages, they know what ekagra means. Ekagra means concentrated. One type of mind is concentrating, trying to concentrate, but ekagra mind is already concentrated. It has achieved concentration. So the mind which is pointed in one direction only, which thinks of one thing only, which holds to one thing only, is called a ekagra or concentrated mind. So how does Patanjali describe that? It says that in this kind of mind, if one thought goes away, it is immediately replaced by exactly the same thought. Like when you suppose that kind of mind, when it is chanting the mantra, suppose Om. So when we chant, sometimes we chant 10 times Om, then sometimes we chant cheese sandwich or chocolate ice cream. But this kind of mind, there is no difference. It will continue the same thing. Om will give rise to another Om. So we have all studied in our school that graph of alternating current. When the current is steady, when there is no voltage fluctuation, what happens? The same wave, absolutely, there is no change. It will go on and on. So here also in concentrated mind also, one thought succeeds another thought, but it is the same thought. The mind can never be deviated from that thought. This is the thing. One thought vanishes from the mind, and the next moment there arises absolutely the same thought. So there is a continuity of these states, and the mind is absolutely one pointed. So when this becomes a habit, when one can concentrate at will, then it is called one pointed or ekagra mind. And when this one pointed state is mastered, then it leads to the final state. That is the niruddha state. This is the thing. So, first two states we can just leave. The third state, the mind starts gathering. When this gathering becomes perfect, then it is called ekagra, that is one pointed. And when this perfection is achieved in this one pointed state, it leads to the final state. That is the niruddha state. So you must have read that Sri Ramakrishna said that Narendra or Swami Vivekananda is perfect in meditation from his very birth. He had brought Narendra, one of the rishis. That rishi was already perfect. Otherwise, how could he help others? If he himself was struggling, then how could he show the way to others? So, that is why Samadhi was so natural to people like Swami Vivekananda, Swami Brahmananda and all that. Because from their birth they had already attained perfection in concentrating the mind. So, this kind of Samadhi is also of two types in yoga. The first one, the lower kind, is called Sampragyata. When we break up, we can understand the meaning. Pragya means knowledge. There is a Mahavakya also, Upanishad, Pragyanam Brahma. Brahma, what is Brahma? Ultimate reality, it is nothing but knowledge. So sampragya means with knowledge. But there is a higher state than this, which is called asampragyata samadhi, that means without knowledge. So now the question will come, how can without knowledge be higher than knowledge? Because knowledge here means that some kind of wave is still there in the mind. When we know something, there is still a vritti. Like suppose this mouse is there. So when I see this with my eyes, I know this mouse. Know means what? There is a vritti or thought wave in my mind which tells me this is a mouse. Without this thought wave, we cannot know anything. But in asampragyata samadhi, what happens? Even that thought wave vanishes. Then there is no difference between the Jivatman or the individual soul and the Paramatman. In Sampragyata Samadhi, there is a slight difference. Sri Ramakrishna describes it beautifully, that he says that suppose two persons are standing and there is a transparent glass, absolutely transparent. So you can feel as if you can touch that person because this glass is completely, but when you go, there is a small barrier. But when this glass is gone, that is also removed. So, Niruddha state is achieved when the mind has gained perfection in concentration. And this Niruddha state is called in yoga parlance. So, what is the feature of this concentration? Yeah, I'll just quote from the Sanskrit, original Sanskrit, that what is the feature of this Sampragyata Samadhi, because these terms we have to be familiar with. As soon as the term is mentioned, we should realize what it means. So, the yastu ekagre chetasi sadbhutam artham pradyotayati means, in yoga philosophy, what do they say? These bhutas. Bhutas means all these things of which this universe is made. Those are called bhutas. So yoga philosophy says that when we gain a knowledge of those bhutas, when we gain a knowledge of nature, perfect knowledge, then the soul realizes its own nature. So, in the final state, in the Niruddha state, the mind gains knowledge of all these bhutas. Chetasi sadbhutam artham pradyotayati. This is one thing. And what happens? Another feature is a kshinoti cha kleshan. Klesha we have seen last time. Klesha means pain-bearing obstructions. It is painful. Kleshas leads to misery. So what happens here in the Niruddha state, in the Sampragyata Samadhi state, the kleshas are rendered ineffective. Kshinoti cha kleshan. What happens? Another thing which happens is karma bandhanani shlathayati. The bonds of karma which are binding us from all sides, they become loose. So all this happens when yogic concentration is achieved. So concentration attained by a mind which is one-pointed, which is occupied with one thought, which brings enlightenment about all the entities of the world, which weakens our kleshas and loosens our bond of karma and paves the way for the final state, Niruddha state, is called Sampragyata Yoga. When we achieve that state, then we can say we have attained yoga. So again and again in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna you see that Sri Ramakrishna says, yoga cannot be attained till there is bhoga. Because this is the attainment of yoga. Not just sitting 10 minutes in the evening, morning, we think we have attained yoga. It's not so simple. Yoga will be attained when we gain concentration. And this concentration of the mind leads to the niruddha or the final state. This is the thing. So, this type of yoga is not attainable by the concentration which can be attained in the first three states. That is, the kshipta, muda and vikshipta. It only starts when the mind is completely concentrated in the ekagra state. And this ekagra state leads to the niruddha state, which is the final state. So what is the final state? In which all the thought processes have been stopped or arrested at will by long practice. This is the last state of the mind. Actually, we cannot even say that the mind exists there. All thoughts are shut out, and the individual soul is united with the Paramatman, that is the universal soul. Jivatma, and the distinction between the Jivatma and the Paramatma goes away because the Chitta completely ceases to function in the Niruddha state. Okay. So concentration is possible. The things to note are, concentration is possible in whatever state the mind is. But all those types of concentration are not yogic concentration. So people are always coming, Swamiji, how to concentrate the mind? But we can ask them, when you are sitting in a movie, your mind is concentrated. So the problem is not only concentrating the mind. The thing we have to see is where the mind is concentrated. If the mind is not concentrated on a good thing, what use it is? It may be harmful also. So, although concentration is achieved in all these 5 states, of course in the last state there is no mind at all, but the concentration achieved in the first 3 states is not yogic concentration. That is why it cannot lead to liberation. Ekagra state is a good state, but here also concentration is not permanent, because again and again distractions in the this one Vikshipta state. Vikshipta state, the mind is concentrated sometimes, but again it is distracted. That is the problem. So it says here in the Yoga Sutras, what is yoga? Anayor dvayor ekagra niruddhayor bhumyor chittasya ekagrata rupa parinama sa yoga ityuktam bhavati. Sa yoga bhavati. What is yoga? Yoga is in these two, anayor dvayor, in these two. Which two? Ekagra niruddhayor. In these two, in ekagra niruddhayor bhumyor chittasya, of the chitta, ekagrata rupa parinama. The concentration, ekagrata, which is achieved when the chitta or the mind is in the last 2 states, is called it yoga ityuktam bhavati is called yoga. So ekagra, here you can see ekagra, what happens? Bahir vritti nirodha. All the external vacillations of the mind, they are stopped. Bahir vritti nirodha. And finally what happens? Niruddhe cha sarvasam vrittinam. When all the vrittis, when all the thought waves are stopped, then we come to the final state. So these are the 5 states of our minds. So we can see that we have a long way to go before we can attain even the semblance of yoga. Now we will just, for clarification, in a point form I have arranged these, the main features of these states. So I will just share those images. The first one you can see, that is the Shipta or the scattered state. This is the Kshipta or the scattered state, the first one which we discussed. You can see here, it is extremely restless due to the preponderance of Rajoguna or Rajas. Second point, it is always active and externalized due to the misconception that happiness or sorrow are inherent in objects of the world. As a result, third point, it cannot think or conceive of any subtle principle. And the fourth is, this kind of mind exists in demons. Human beings are not supposed to have this kind of mind. So next I will show you the next one, that is even worse, that is the Muda state. So these are the points regarding the Muda state. It cannot differentiate between right and wrong due to the preponderance of tamas. It is completely covered in darkness. Second point, it is a very dull mind which only tends to injury. It only thinks of how to harm others. And this kind of mind also is said to exist only in subhuman beings, not in human beings. Now we come to the higher state, that is the Vikshipta or the gathering state. So here the mind starts the struggle. We wake up from our slumber. Then we start thinking, what am I doing? How am I spending my life? So the struggle starts. The mind starts to try to gather itself. But naturally it cannot succeed in one day. So sometimes it is concentrated, but sometimes it is distracted. And most of us, most of spiritual aspirants have this kind of mind. But it is not so bad because Sattva Guna has started functioning. It is slowly rising. Now what we have to do is see that it keeps on increasing. When this state is achieved, then we are on the path to spiritual progress. But we have to be very alert, because Rajas and Tamas are lurking in the corner. So they can come any time and overpower us. So this is certainly not a very safe state, although it is not a bad state. And when a person succeeds in gaining mastery, when a person can concentrate the mind at will, then we come to the next state, which is the ekagra state. So this is a very, very high state. Persons like great spiritual persons like Swami Vivekananda and all that, uh, saints of other religions like Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Paul, all these people in every religion. So they achieve this concentration when they can hold on to one thought only. And when that thought fades away, another thought arises which is the same thought. And when this kind of ekagrata or one pointedness is mastered, this means that when perfection in meditation is achieved, it leads to sampragyata samadhi. That is samadhi with knowledge. And when everything is wiped out, when there are no thought waves at all, when the mind is completely stopped functioning as it were, then what happens? Sri Ramakrishna says the state is achieved when the pure mind becomes one with the pure Atman. Because only the Atman is completely pure. So when the mind becomes completely pure, then what remains to distinguish it from the Atman? Nothing remains. Pure water into pure water, what will be the result? Only pure water. That is the final state, and that state, when it is achieved, we become free. We are then free souls. Then nothing, nobody, no circumstance can disturb us, throw us off our balance. Nothing will disturb the calmness of our mind. Even when such persons, when from outside they seem restless, but inside they always hold on to that. That restlessness is not like our restlessness. We become identified with the outer things when we become restless. But these persons, sometimes it is just a show. Like in Swami Tuyanandaji's life, there is an incident. So once, Turiyanandaji used to scold severely when his sevaks were there or anybody. If anybody made a mistake, absolutely fire. So, but when he saw that the other person, maybe he was much grieved and all, in one moment he would become calm. Because his anger was not real anger. Anger could not overpower him. He used to show anger to correct others. So when these people, when they exhibit some emotions, we should not think that they are under those emotions. They have gone far above. Sri Ramakrishna also says that the anger of these persons is like what? It is like a burnt piece of rope. A rope is there, you can tie it with something, but when you burn it, what happens? If you touch it also, it disintegrates. It is nothing, it is just the appearance. It is not a rope at all. So, Sri Ramakrishna also says in the Gospel that the tendencies like anger which we see in those persons are just appearances. They have gone far beyond all these things. So, this is the short discussion we have had on the human mind, and I will just share slides which we have seen in all these 5 discussions, so that just for recapitulation. The first one you can see, that is the Shipta or the scattered state. This is the Kshipta or the scattered state, the first one which we discussed. you can see here, it is extremely restless due to the preponderance of Rajoguna or Rajas. Second point, it is always active and externalized due to the misconception that happiness or sorrow are inherent in objects of the world. As a result, third point, it cannot think or conceive of any subtle principle. And the fourth is, this kind of mind exists in demons. Human beings are not supposed to have this kind of mind. So next I will show you the next one, that is even worse, that is the Muda state. So these are the points regarding the Muda state. It cannot differentiate between right and wrong due to the preponderance of tamas. It is completely covered in darkness. Second point, it is a very dull mind which only tends to injury. It only thinks of how to harm others. And this kind of mind also is said to exist only in subhuman beings, not in human beings. Now we come to the higher state, that is the Vikshipta or the gathering state. So here the mind starts the struggle. We wake up from our slumber. Then we start thinking, what am I doing? How am I spending my life? So the struggle starts. The mind starts to try to gather itself. But naturally it cannot succeed in one day. So sometimes it is concentrated, but sometimes it is distracted. And most of us, most of spiritual aspirants have this kind of mind. But it is not so bad because Sattva Guna has started functioning. It is slowly rising. Now what we have to do is see that it keeps on increasing. When this state is achieved, then we are on the path to spiritual progress. But we have to be very alert, because Rajas and Tamas are lurking in the corner. So they can come any time and overpower us. So this is certainly not a very safe state, although it is not a bad state. And when a person succeeds in gaining mastery, when a person can concentrate the mind at will, then we come to the next state, which is the Ekagra state. So this is a very high state. Persons like, great spiritual persons like Swami Vivekananda and all that, saints of other religions like Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Paul, all these people in every religion. So they achieve this concentration when they can hold on to one thought only. And when that thought fades away, another thought arises which is the same thought. And when this kind of ekagrata or one-pointedness is mastered, this means that when perfection in meditation is achieved, it leads to sampragyata samadhi. That is samadhi with knowledge. And when everything is wiped out, when there are no thought waves at all, when the mind is completely stopped functioning, as it were, then what happens? Sri Ramakrishna says the state is achieved when the pure mind becomes one with the pure Atman. Because only the Atman is completely pure. So when the mind becomes completely pure, then what remains to distinguish it from the Atman? Nothing remains. pure water into pure water, what will be the result? Only pure water. That is the final state, and that state, when it is achieved, we become free. We are then free souls. Then nothing, nobody, no circumstance can disturb us, throw us off our balance. Nothing will disturb the calmness of our mind. Even when such persons, when from outside they seem restless, but inside they always hold on to that. That restlessness is not like our restlessness. We become identified with the outer things when we become restless. But these persons, it is just, sometimes it is just a show. Like in Swami Vivekanandaji's life, there is an incident. So once, Turiyananji used to scold severely when his sevaks were there or anybody. If anybody made a mistake, absolutely fire. So, but when he saw that the other person, maybe he was much grieved and all, in one moment he would become calm. Because his anger was not real anger. Anger could not overpower him. He used to show anger to correct others. So when these people, when they emotions exhibit some emotions, we should not think that they are under those emotions. They have gone far above. Sri Ramakrishna also says that the anger of these persons is like what? It is like a burnt piece of rope. A rope is there, you can tie it with something, but when you burn it, what happens? If you touch it also, it disintegrates. It is nothing, it is just the appearance. It is not a rope at all. So, Sri Ramakrishna also says in the Gospel that the tendencies like anger which we see in those persons are just appearances. They have gone far beyond all these things. So, this is the short discussion we have had on the human mind, and I will just share slides which we have seen in all these 5 discussions, so that just for recapitulation. Let me share it here. So we had started from this point. We had seen that the condition of the mind is all important in our life, not what we have externally, how many television sets we have, how many cars we have, that is not important. The condition of the mind is what determines whether we'll be happy or unhappy in life. What is the nature of the mind? It is matter, and thus it is distinct from the Atman or the soul of man. And the mind is called Antakarana. Antakarana means it is the internal instrument. Although the mind is unconscious, it reflects consciousness of the soul or God, of the Atman, just as the moon reflects the consciousness of the sun. And all that we do or think leaves an impression on the mind. And self-discipline is the only way to train our mind. Then we had begun our discussion. So we have first discussed the 4 states or functions of the mind. Then we discussed the 3 levels of the mind. Then the 3 constituents. And today we have discussed the 5 conditions. So what are the 4 states you can see here? Sorry. The fourth state we had discussed, the chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff. Means where everything takes place, where everything is happening. And when in the chitta the thought wave arises of deliberation, it is called manas. When the thought wave arises of determination, it is called buddhi. And the feeling of I, which is in the chitta, that is called ahankara or egoism. And we had then discussed how perception takes place. You can see before you. So what happens first are the external instruments, like all these ears, eyes, all these are external instruments. They are not the organs. The organs are in the brain. So when an outside impulse comes, it impinges on our instrument, like ear or eye, etc. Then the sensation goes to the brain. Then the mind interprets that sensation. First the manas, it deliberates, what is this, what is this? Then comes the buddhi. Buddhi says, it is this. Then ahankara says, I know this. These three processes take place with every cognition, but they take place so fast that we don't realize it. And the whole thing is presented to the self. All these sensations. Then the self knows anything. That is called knowledge. So, the mind is also called the antakarana or the internal instrument. What does it consist of? First, the organs. Again, organs do not mean the external instrument. Organ means the mind. It is in the mind. When we go from this body, the antakarana goes with us. It takes on a new body. So what does the antakarana consist of? First is the organs, then the manas, the buddhi and the ahankara. And according to Advaita Vedanta, the chitta is also included in this. This is according to Sankhya. So then we had discussed what is the chitta. This is very important. See, again and again, if you read the works of Swami Vivekananda or any spiritual literature, they say that what is required, what we are doing when we are practicing spiritual disciplines, we are practicing chitta shuddhi. Everything is now in that. The mind is like a big lake. So everything is there in that lake now. Good, the bad, everything. Now we have to increase the good. So what is the chitta like? You can see here it is like a transparent lake. And the waves which rise in it by the impact of sense impressions constitute manas or mind. Therefore, the mind consists of a succession of thought waves. From these mental waves arise desire. Then that desire transforms itself into will and work through its gross instruments, the body. So this is the chitta. And when all these modifications are stopped in the niruddha state, then only the mind becomes no mind, so to say. So after this we had discussed the different levels of the mind, the conscious, subconscious and the superconscious. We had seen that in the conscious mind there is only one level when all the activity is there, when the thoughts which are there, they are in an active state. So in the conscious mind there is only one level. But in the subconscious mind there are three levels. First is dormant state, means those impressions are waiting for a proper time to come up. They are still sleeping. Like when Swami Vivekananda was young, Sri Ramakrishna saw that possibility in him, that he is going to be a very great teacher one day. But others did not see. because it was dormant, it was waiting for that opportunity. The second is tanu or attenuated state, when the bad things in the mind have become weak. And the third state in the subconscious, overpowered state, when one impression overpowers another impression which is of opposite nature for some period. It is a temporary state. So, these things we had discussed, and we had also seen what are the kleshas. The kleshas are the pain-bearing obstructions. All these functions of the mind, whether it be tanu, udara or whatever it be dormant, or it has to be got rid of. It can't be kept. It is not something good which we have to keep, because it all leads to kleshas. Kleshas means pain-bearing obstructions. And how to reduce the kleshas? How to reduce the bad thoughts? We had seen that the yogic procedure is by thinking consciously of contrary thoughts. That is pratipaksha bhavana. So this is pratipaksha bhavana. Bringing contrary thoughts when some undesirable thoughts arise in the mind. So this concludes our discussions of the basic features of the mind. Basic features, so much detail, it has been discussed in so much detail in the Yoga Sutras, it is simply fantastic analysis. So slowly we will take it up one by one. But now that we have discussed all this, we are now more or less ready for discussing the yoga philosophy. Because when we start the discussion, these terms will come up again and again. Chitta, manas, buddhi, all these come. So now we are familiar. As soon as the word chitta is said, we know chitta is the stuff which the mind is made of. So we will be able to grasp the basics of the yoga philosophy, which we will start soon. I will give you a break. Next week there will be only online, of course. I may be in Calgary. Of course, I will inform you. So this concludes the short discussion of the basic features of the mind. So before we have songs, I will just unmute you, because many of you may not want to wait.